What's going on, guys? I hope that you're all doing well and welcome back to another video. Today I wanted to try something that I've never done before and do an old-fashioned top 10 facts video and just see how it goes. I thought it might be fun. If it works, and if it doesn't, no big deal, but this might be a cool way to just pull lore from legends and canon and just learn some cool stuff about Star Wars together. So let's jump right into 10 interesting facts about Darth Vader. Number 1. He had to create his own lightsaber form. After the terrible injuries he suffered on Mustafar and being placed inside his life support armor, Vader was forced to adapt his fighting style due to how bulky and heavy his suit and cybernetics were. As Anakin Skywalker, he had been the master of the offensive Form 5, but as Vader, he was forced to combine several of the forms into a hybrid version that was tailored to his needs. He incorporated aspects of all 7 traditional forms into his use of the Gem-So variant, and rather than trying to fight through his armor, he fought with it. He utilized the armor's weight and the unnatural strength provided by his cybernetic arms to deliver powerful blows. It was said that even one of his strikes contained enough power to disarm his opponent. For defense, Vader used a customized two-handed version of Sorisu, designed to protect the control panel on his chest. Number 2. He actually hated his Sith lightsaber. 1 week after the events of Revenge of the Sith, the Emperor instructed Vader to travel to the site of the Death Star's construction and build his new lightsaber that he would wield as a Sith. He provided Vader with a red synthetic crystal and also gave him his own lightsaber hilt to serve as design inspiration. However, Vader was not fond of his new master's lightsaber and thought it looked like an antique, so he didn't reference it when constructing his own. Determined to please the Emperor, Vader intended to fashion a lightsaber hilt that was unique. But after entering a meditative trance, he ended up building one that looked nearly identical to the first lightsaber he had used as a Jedi. Vader was very disappointed that it turned out that way, and he knew that his Sith weapon mirrored Anakin Skywalker's original weapon in every way. He made slight adjustments to the grip so that it would accommodate his large cybernetic hands, and ultimately decided to use it anyway. Number 3. He personally had Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru killed. So we know that Owen and Beru Lars were brutally executed in A New Hope by the stormtroopers searching for the Death Star plans. They were burned up and were skeletons when Luke found them. But interestingly enough, in the expanded universe, it was written into the lore that Vader found out his troopers had them in custody and personally ordered their execution because he wanted them dead. When the stormtroopers called him via hologram and told him the names of the farmers, he remembered his mother's death at the hands of the Tusken Raiders, and he blamed the Lars family for being too weak to protect her. So he told the troopers to kill Owen and Beru and to leave the connection open so that he could watch while they were burned alive. Number 4. He only built his castle on Mustafar to try to resurrect Padme. After the rise of the Empire, Vader took control of the entire planet of Mustafar and had his personal castle, Fortress Vader, built there. Vader had traveled to Mustafar to bleed his Kyber crystal and discovered a dark side locus inside an ancient cave. Once he learned more about the powerful source of dark side energy, he came to believe that it would allow him to see and resurrect Padme. The construction of his castle, with the help of the ancient Sith Lord Darth Momin, was meant to harness the power of the Locust and open a doorway into the Force itself, beyond the limitations of time and space. Vader did eventually make it through the doorway and found Padme, but she refused to return to life with him. Number 5. He felt really sad when he finally killed Obi-Wan. When Vader and Obi-Wan dueled for the final time on the Death Star, their feelings were sensed by Yoda through the Force. Yoda felt a vibration in the Force that was familiar, strong, and pulsating fiercely, carrying darkness and loneliness along with it. He realized that it was what remained of Anakin, trapped inside Darth Vader. Yoda felt Obi-Wan and Vader clash, their pulses battling across the Force itself. He suddenly sensed Obi-Wan burst into the netherworld of the Force as Vader killed him, and then Yoda immediately sensed Vader's reaction. At the moment of his old master's death, Vader fell deeper into the loneliness that consumed his entire existence, and the part of Anakin that still existed inside of him suffered so much that Yoda could feel his pain. Number 6. He knew that he had no chance of beating Luke. This one's going to be tough for all of you Vader fans to swallow, but it's part of the lore and it's canon because it doesn't contradict anything else that's part of canon. That's how it works with the original 6 novelizations, look it up. Anyway, while Vader was fighting Luke on the second Death Star in Return of the Jedi, he genuinely realized that his son had the ability to destroy him. After Luke kicked him down the stairs with ease, the thought entered Vader's mind that he might lose. He was astounded at how powerful Luke had become since their last duel. Vader thought that this was completely unexpected, and he felt humiliated at the thought of being defeated by his own son. He was surprised by the possibility, and he felt slightly afraid of Luke. But then, those emotions gave way to blind rage, and all he wanted was revenge. So yeah, according to the lore, Vader was trying his absolute hardest to beat Luke, but Luke was just more powerful than him. Number 7. He had to use the Force just to walk. Vader's suit and mechanical limbs were intentionally poorly put together by the Emperor. One insane fact that was added into the EU is that he had to call on the Force just to walk around because his legs and boots were so messed up. Basically, the droids that put him together used an inferior metal for his legs, so strips of his joints would get snagged on his bodysuit when he tried to move around. The feet of his mechanical legs also did not even fit the boots on his suit, and the boots themselves were raised in the heel, which made him lean forward at all times. As a result, it was hard for him to walk around without just tipping over and falling on his face, so he had to use the Force. Number 8. He actually bonded with his stormtroopers. After the rise of the Empire, the 501st Legion came to be known as Vader's Fist, his personal troopers that served him on missions. As they transitioned into Imperial stormtroopers, the Sith Lord formed a strong bond with them. Adapting to his new life as a cyborg encased in a suit of armor, Vader came to realize that he felt more comfortable and at home among his stormtroopers than he did among other flesh and blood beings. The troopers also felt more at ease around Vader and found it reasonable that he wore a bodysuit and armor just like they did. Number 9. He kept saying he killed Anakin because he thought it'd make him stronger. After the rise of the Empire, Vader adopted a stance that would be repeated by others like Obi-Wan. Vader had destroyed Anakin. But the reason that he would constantly say that to himself and to his enemies over the years might surprise you. Vader believed that pain was the path to domination through the dark side, and he suffered to prove himself a worthy apprentice to Darth Sidious. He decided that Anakin had been weak, and became convinced that by telling himself that he killed Anakin, the dark side would come to serve him, and he would grow into a more powerful Sith Lord. Number 10. He thought Luke was the most powerful Jedi of all time. After the events of The Empire Strikes Back, Vader continued hunting for Luke across the galaxy, and they nearly crossed paths multiple times. Once, when he sensed Luke's presence nearby, Luke appeared as a powerful locus within the Force. Vader thought of how he had already exterminated most of the Jedi with his own hands, but he realized that he had not destroyed the strongest of them all, his own son. He wondered who could have known that his son would turn out to be the most powerful being in the galaxy, and that fact actually caused Vader to smile underneath his mask. The days and weeks following the events of Revenge of the Sith were incredibly eventful for Darth Vader, as he struggled to acclimate to his new cybernetic armor and embrace his role as a Sith apprentice to the new Emperor. This time period is fascinating, and I really love how it is portrayed in the Canon comics, specifically the 2017 Darth Vader series. The story that I'd like to talk about today not only focuses on why Vader built his castle on Mustafar, but how the endeavor of constructing the fortress brought him into conflict with an ancient Sith Lord. So let's jump into these comics and learn how Darth Vader fought Darth Momin on Mustafar shortly after Revenge of the Sith. Surprisingly, Palpatine brought Vader to a large hangar that housed Padme's personal ship, the one she had flown to Mustafar to confront him in. The ship was a gift for Vader, who stared at its shiny hull in silence. Palpatine remarked that it was an elegant royal vessel from the elegant world of Naboo. The Emperor told Vader that for the time being, he and the Inquisitors had killed all Jedi they had found. If more Jedi surfaced in the future, they would destroy them. But he instructed Vader to travel to Alderaan and show the Empire's might to Bail Organa. However, Vader refused. Vader defiantly replied that he had destroyed the remaining Jedi for his master, and he would perform any other tasks that Palpatine required, but first he wanted to be given a world. Although he was surprised at first, Palpatine realized that Vader wanted a place to hone his skills. Since Coruscant was his world, it made sense that Vader should also have a world to call his own. He offered Vader Naboo, since he knew that his apprentice had connections to the world, and he told Vader that he held him in such high esteem that he would give him his homeworld. He also suggested Tatooine, saying that Vader could burn its sand to glass if he wanted to, but Vader refused them both and requested Mustafar. Palpatine granted his request and told him to make Mustafar his stronghold, to use the planet however he wished. He also would send an Imperial architect to accompany Vader, to design whatever facilities he wanted. Palpatine remarked that Mustafar was the world where Vader was defeated and burned, and although he had his own suspicions about why Vader chose it, he wanted to know for sure. Vader replied that the Emperor had sent him to Mustafar to bleed his Kyber crystal at the dark side locust that was on the planet. When he touched that power, he saw deeper into the Force than ever before. Thus, Vader believed that things were possible at that locust that were impossible elsewhere. Palpatine replied that Vader was truly a perfect Sith, as he did not let anything go. He said that perhaps Padme did await Vader on Mustafar, and perhaps the dark side would return her to him. He said that one way or another, Vader would learn a great deal on Mustafar, and then he said he had one final gift for his apprentice. Palpatine presented Vader with the mask of Darth Momin, which was a powerful artifact of the dark side. He said that Darth Momin was uncommon among Sith. While many Sith Lords built their legacy through destruction, Momin preferred to create, and the uses he found for the Force were truly unique and would probably never be replicated. Since Vader also sought unusual paths through the dark side, Palpatine thought that he would find the mask to be inspirational, and instructed him to take it with him to Mustafar. Vader replied that he had never seen the name Momin in any holocron, Jedi or Sith, and Palpatine said that Momin was deemed to be a heretic, and his story was suppressed throughout history. Vader then asked how Palpatine knew Momin's story, and the Emperor simply replied that the mask had told him. So Vader brought Momin's mask to Mustafar, along with 2 Imperial architects. However, while Vader was meditating on the dark side locust, in the same cave that he had bled his Kyber crystal, he heard a terrible scream, and returned to the ship to find that Momin's mask had possessed one of the architects and killed the other. Vader quickly killed the man, and then saw that he had designed a fortress for Vader while wearing the mask. Intrigued, Vader carried the mask with the Force and brought it back to the cave with him, asking it what it was. Bolstered by the power of the dark side, the mask replied that it was Momin, and began to tell Vader his origin. Momin started to create things when he was young, sculptures so terrifying and grotesque that viewers called him a monster. He was imprisoned, only to be rescued by a Sith named Shah. Lady Shah took Momin as her apprentice and taught him the ways of the Force and the dark side. Soon after, Momin killed her, though he never took an apprentice of his own. He believed he had no time to teach since there was so much to learn. Momin studied the mysteries of the Force and realized that he had been creating for the wrong audience. He decided that the Force itself was the only true audience, the only one worth impressing. If he could build something worthy of the dark side, then he might become worthy himself, and he began to work on his greatest project. Momin chose a city and designed an engine that would begin to destroy the city, but at the moment of doom, he would use the power of the Force to stop the flow of time, freezing the citizens' minds full of pain and fear, creating an eternal shrine to the dark side of the Force. It would be Momin's masterpiece. However, as Momin prepared to use his engine, the Jedi interfered, and the presence of the light side of the Force caused him to lose control of the power he was wielding. Momin was killed as the engine worked, and his spirit was sealed inside his mask. Vader briefly put Momin's mask on, but when the eyes began to glow and it almost took control of him, he tossed it against the cave's wall. Instead of wearing the mask himself, Vader placed it upon a local inhabitant, giving Momin a new physical body. Vader told Momin that the locus on Mustafar was a door, and he wanted Momin's knowledge to unlock it. He asked Momin what the design he had created on the ship was, and Momin said that it was the key. The fortress that he had designed would tune the energies of the darkside locus, allowing him to use the Force to pierce the veil of time between life and death. Overcome with emotion, Vader began to choke Momin with the Force, warning that he had been lied to about being able to prevent death before, and told Momin not to offer things he could not provide. Momin replied that he didn't want to lie, he only wanted a chance to create, to make something perfect. Vader agreed, releasing him, but warned that if Momin betrayed him, he would suffer, and Momin assured him that the fortress would be his masterpiece. However, the process of building Fortress Vader took a very long time, and the fortress had to go through 8 variations. Each time they tried to open the door of the locus, the volatile energies of the Force would destroy it. Finally, Vader told Momin that whether the 9th version worked or not, there would be no 10th. As Vader attempted to open the doorway with Momin watching, they both sensed that this attempt was working, that they could feel the power of the dark side waiting to be touched. Vader succeeded in opening the doorway, but was interrupted before he could walk through when local Mustafarians attacked the fortress. When Vader went outside to see the battle for himself, Momin betrayed him. He summoned his former body from the past from the doorway and placed his mask on his resurrected body. Momin declared that he was his own masterpiece and ignited both of his red lightsabers. After defeating the attackers, Vader returned to the Locust Cave and found Momin there. Momin noted that Vader was tired and weaker from the battle, yet he was newly born. As they began to duel, Momin told Vader that he was not the chosen one, and the dark side did not serve Vader, since he was a stub of charred meat in a cape with a dead wife. Momin was easily beating Vader, and even sliced off his right arm. On his knees, as Momin prepared to deliver the killing blow, Vader said that he had one question, and asked if Momin had lied about what lay beyond the doorway. Momin replied that he hadn't, and all things were possible through the Force, and that what Vader desired did wait for him on the other side, but he would never be able to pass through. The dark side would not allow it. Momin said that Vader had been poorly taught about what the dark side actually was and why the Sith must serve it. He said it saddened and disgusted him to see that the Sith had become such Jedi-obsessed weaklings, and just as he was calling Vader pathetic, Vader used the Force to strike Momin with a giant slab of stone, crushing the ancient Sith Lord against the cavern wall. Momin said that Vader wasn't powerful enough to kill him, since the dark side itself loved him and wanted him to live. Vader replied that if that was true, then he would live again, and he pushed the stone further, crushing Momin's physical host and killing him once again, until the mask went dark and Momin's spirit was trapped inside of it once more. Vader declared that his destiny was his own, as he opened the doorway and prepared to walk through to find Padme. In the Star Wars Purge comics, which are now part of Legends, there were amazing stories told immediately after the rise of the Empire, as Jedi survivors scrambled to exist in a galaxy that turned against them. One of these stories involved the niece of Jedi Master Plo Koon, who was named Sha Koon, and she was a powerful Jedi in her own right. She was actually in the Jedi Temple during Operation Nightfall, and she witnessed Anakin kill Jedi, so she knew that he had turned to the dark side. Her story in these comics is a fascinating one, which led her to a conflict with Darth Vader. So let's jump right in. Sha Koon was gifted with visions of the future, but to a much greater extent than normal Jedi were. She had premonitions similar to how Sifo-Dyas did, like when he foresaw the galaxy falling into the Clone Wars about 10 years before it actually happened. The comic begins with her seeing many images all at once, including herself fighting in the war, Plo Koon's death over Cato Nemoidia during Order 66, and Anakin killing Jocasta Nu in the Jedi Archives with his eyes a bright yellow. When Sha attained the rank of Jedi Knight, she was given a Padawan named Baeliss Archon, who died during the Clone Wars. His death changed Sha Koon, and she refused to continue fighting in the war, adopting a stance of pacifism. After the death of Count Dooku, Plo Koon asked her to scour the Jedi Archives and try to find any information that might lead to the Sith Lord that was close to the Republic hierarchy. Much time passed as she did her research in the archives, until she sensed the death of her uncle, and it was so overwhelming that she collapsed. When she awoke, there was smoke in the temple and screaming in the Force. When Sha went to investigate, she saw clone troopers from the 501st, and they opened fire on her. She deflected their blaster bolts and ran, which is when she saw Anakin kill Jocasta Nu. She felt his mind through the Force and saw that his thoughts were like ice and he had gone to the dark side. He was a Sith Lord. Sha ran blindly to safety. She knew of secret tunnels shared only by a few Padawans, and she was able to escape the temple by using them. She waited and let time pass in the underlevels of the temple, but eventually she contacted the newly crowned Emperor Palpatine with a proposal. Using secret access codes, she spoke to Palpatine and revealed that she knew he was a Sith Lord. She said that she was one of the defeated Jedi, and that she had been studying Sith lore. She knew that the dark side was stronger than the light, and with the destruction of the Jedi Order, she could see who held the true power in the galaxy. Palpatine asked what she wanted, and Sha said that she wanted to serve the Sith as his true apprentice, but he replied that there could only be 2 Sith Lords at a time. She knew of Darth Bane's rule of 2, and said she would kill his apprentice to take his place. Palpatine agreed to send his apprentice to face her in the underlevels below the temple, and he challenged Sha Koon to kill him, if she could. When Darth Vader arrived, Sha sensed that he was Anakin immediately. She could feel his familiar presence in the Force and his thoughts. And as her presence touched Vader's mind, he remembered her too. Vader announced that he remembered her from the night of Order 66, and said that he would have killed her in the archives if she hadn't run away. Vader said that she claimed that she wanted to kill him and take his place, but both he and Sidious knew that was a lie. What she really wanted was to destroy the Sith. Everything had been a ruse. Vader said that her plan was as pathetically simple as it was doomed. Sha Koon said that if she could not kill Sidious, then she would cripple him by killing Vader, and she stepped out to face him. She called him killer of younglings, betrayer of friends, destroyer of the Jedi to whom he claimed allegiance, and an animal. As they ignited their blades, Vader told her that she was the last of the Jedi, and with her death, his mission would be complete. As they began to fight, Sha wondered if she was the last Jedi left alive. She was able to slice Vader across the back, and thought that if she failed, the Sith would rule the galaxy. The responsibility had fallen to her to destroy them. They traded a few more violent blows until Vader managed to force choke her, hold her in the air, and stab her right through the chest. As she began to die, she had visions of the future. For a moment, Shah believed she had failed, but then the Force showed her what would happen. She saw Luke and Leia, Anakin's children. She saw Luke facing Palpatine and being electrocuted. And then she saw that Anakin would turn back to the light, redeeming himself and turning on Palpatine, bringing balance back to the Force. And with Luke, the Jedi would truly return. As Shah Kahn died, she realized the future of the Jedi did not depend on her. When Vader reported back to the Emperor, Palpatine was shocked to learn that the Jedi had died at peace instead of in despair. Vader replied that he was sure of what he had felt. Palpatine said that it didn't matter and that none of the Jedi mattered anymore. The Sith controlled the galaxy, and their rule would never end. After the duel with Luke on Cloud City, where Darth Vader revealed that he was Luke's father, both of them were greatly disturbed by the encounter. Father and son would follow their own path, tethered to the past. Vader became even more obsessed with locating his son and punishing anyone responsible for concealing his child's existence. Vader embarked upon a quest to discover the truth and destroy those who had conspired against him, believing that they had made Luke too weak to answer the call of his Sith destiny. This journey of Vader exploring his past and learning the truth of Padmé's death is explained in the 2020 Darth Vader comic series and the canon book Skywalker: A Family at War. Vader traced Luke's steps all the way back to the cradle of the Skywalker family, Tatooine. Ironically, this was the first place Luke was recorded as living and the last place Vader had thought to look. Confronted by his own haunted past, there Vader found no real answers, only pain and rage. His mother's grave had been virtually obliterated by human intervention or drifting sand. Either way, the very event that had set him on his path to the dark side was all but forgotten by the natural world, a matter of insignificance in its history. And in the Lars home, he imagined neither Shmi nor Anakin had been mentioned with much enthusiasm, if at all. In the burned-out shell of the hovel, Vader stood over the scorched stone dining slab where Klieg Lars had admitted defeat and accepted Shmi's death, and darkened the door of the garage where Anakin had tried to mend his wounded heart by losing himself in some meaningless task. Vader tried to shrug off the phantasms, but they clung to his black cape, irrefutable tokens of his own past. In his joy over discovering Padmé's pregnancy, Anakin had wanted to be present for his son's life, but it was the Lars family that had nurtured and cared for the child, raising him as their own in the place that Shmi had made her home and that Anakin had decreed as her final resting place. Vader moved on to Coruscant, to the apartments of the woman who had carried Luke, a place that, as Anakin, he had known intimately. Some 23 years after his last night of fitful sleep in Padmé's chamber, Vader stood among the dust-covered furniture searching for a clue. Palpatine had claimed that Anakin had killed Padmé in his rage, but once Vader knew that she had survived long enough to deliver the child, he was determined to discover who had seen her die and to have his revenge. A transmitter in the home they shared led him to the jungles of Vendaxa. There, he came face to face with Padmé herself, or rather, her ghost. She seemed taller and older, but she wore the same look of determination, the carefully twisted brown hair, and she spoke with the commanding voice of a queen. Padmé was dead, he told himself furiously. The woman standing before him, hovering in the air as he clasped one hand around her throat through the Force, was not Padmé. It was soon revealed that more than 2 decades after her death, Padmé's handmaiden Sabe still guarded her friend's home from afar, as if keeping watch for a holy spirit prophesied to return. The handmaidens of Amidala were loyal to the end. Sabe had been the queen's double, a bond unlike any other the young queen and politician had enjoyed. And after Padme's untimely death, Sabe had come to believe that someone had stolen Padme away and murdered her. Sabe wanted to avenge both the fallen queen and Anakin Skywalker, unaware that she was already standing before all that remained of Padme's valiant knight, and believing that Vader had likely killed them both. In the rolling hills of Theed, the handmaidens who guarded Padme's tomb prepared for battle. However, for Vader, fighting her servants exposed him to a welter of highly disturbing emotions. A gap in Vader's armor had appeared when he reached for his son's acceptance, but fighting the veritable twin of his dead wife brought forth feelings of almost unbearable regret. Sabe looked the most like Padme, but even the others, who had survived the Naboo invasion, the assassination attempts, and the Clone Wars, all exhibited her poise and determination. They could have passed for her sisters, down to their mannerisms, imprinted when they were just teenage girls in charge of a planet. Although Vader had choked Padme's handmaidens into submission, he could not bring himself to end their lives. Then, he committed a transgression that was low even for Vader. He broke into Padme's tomb. On a pillow sewn from Naboo silk, he found the Japor snippet a besotted young Anakin had carved for a queen, a token to ensure she would remember him. He then cracked open the doors of her crypt. The striking facade of her coffin, carved to match her beautiful face in repose, fully exposed the growing weakness in Vader's heart. Vader reached through the Force to break open the stone sarcophagus, but visions of Padme in life and in his final embrace, choked by his hand, flashed unbidden through his mind. The pain that had fueled him for decades turned into a whimper, replaced by a torrent of grief. Vader could not bear to look upon the bones of the mother of his son, her decaying flesh surely almost as unrecognizable as his own skin, modeled beneath his helmet. Instead, his droid scanned her remains and located a medical implant that led Vader to his final destination. Polis Massa had been abandoned, and the maternity ward was in shambles. But inside a midwifery droid's damaged databanks, Vader found the possible starting point of a new beginning. On a holovid recording, made just after the twins were ferried away from their mother, he watched as Padme beckoned to Obi-Wan with her final breath. Despite all Anakin's mistakes, his betrayal of her and the galaxy, Vader learned that Padme had used her last moments to declare her undying belief in the righteous heart of Anakin Skywalker. She told Obi-Wan that she knew there was still good within Anakin. Suddenly, doubt woke within Vader's soul. He had allowed himself to wallow in his grief. Instead of feeding the darkness, he began to question his dedication to the Sith. After more than 2 decades, the conflict within the soul of Anakin Skywalker was reignited by the love of the woman who had refused to believe he was irredeemable. After being taken by Obi-Wan Kenobi on Mustafar, Anakin Skywalker's Jedi lightsaber remained on Tatooine for many years, until it was eventually passed to Luke. Luke used the lightsaber for 3 years until he lost it in a duel with Darth Vader. However, the movies never really tell us if Vader even noticed that Luke had his old lightsaber, meaning we don't know what Vader thought of it or what his reaction was if he realized. At least that was the case until the canon Star Wars comics gave us the story. I want to jump into the very first issues of both the 2015 main Star Wars series and the 2015 Darth Vader series, which both take place before The Empire Strikes Back. I'm also going to pull some details from the canon book Skywalker: A Family at War. In this story, Luke and Vader meet for the first time and have no idea of their relation to each other. However, Vader does notice that the young Jedi student possesses Anakin's lightsaber. During a rebel raid on an Imperial weapons factory on Simoon 1, Luke, Leia, Han, and Chewie were on the ground attempting to sabotage the central power station. However, as the group fought their way through the facility, Luke felt a disturbance in the Force and wandered off. Alone in a long corridor, Luke heard the disembodied voice of Obi-Wan. Luke said that he could sense Vader, the man who had killed his father. Like I said, at this point in the timeline, Luke still believed that Darth Vader had murdered Anakin because this is before Empire, obviously. Luke believed himself strong enough to face Vader, and he told Obi-Wan that he needed to confront the Sith Lord and end it all. As Luke ignited his lightsaber, Obi-Wan's voice told Luke to run, but it was too late. Vader was already there. Vader told Luke that he held a lightsaber like an untrained child, and he was not a Jedi. He asked Luke who he was. Luke replied that Vader had killed his father, and the Dark Lord said that he had killed many fathers. Then Luke attacked first, wildly swinging his blade and screaming in rage, but Vader easily parried his blow. Vader commented that what he was witnessing was pathetic and wondered who had sent Luke there to die. Luke revealed that he was on the Death Star when Vader killed Obi-Wan, but Vader just interrupted him by pulling his lightsaber away with the Force. As soon as Vader held the weapon, poised for a killing blow, he felt the familiar craftsmanship of Anakin Skywalker. For the first time since Mustafar, he held the weapon of the Jedi Knight he had once been, muttering to himself that he knew the weapon as he stared at the hilt. The brief distraction allowed Han and Leia to smash through the roof with an Imperial walker, and Luke was able to escape into the ensuing battle. However, to Luke's horror, Vader wielded both his old blue saber and his red Sith saber in the fight, killing prisoners of the facility that the rebels were trying to help escape. Luke could do nothing as Vader used the blue blade in his rampage. Eventually, Vader was temporarily stunned by blasts from the walker the rebels had hijacked, and he dropped Anakin's lightsaber in the rubble. Using a speeder, Luke retrieved the weapon and made his escape with his friends on the Millennium Falcon. Walking through the debris and flames, Vader watched the Falcon fly away in silence. Then he wondered to himself why Obi-Wan had given that boy his lightsaber. He realized that the boy was Obi-Wan's last great hope, what the Jedi Master had died to protect on the Death Star. While the boy may have been strong in the Force, he was untrained, and Vader stated that the only person left to train Luke was him. He vowed to find the young rebel and turn him to the dark side. Learning that the boy possessed his old Jedi lightsaber further fueled Vader's obsession with finding him. He believed that if he captured Luke, he could extract all he knew about the Rebel Alliance and train him to be a weapon of the dark side. With the aid of Boba Fett, Vader was soon confronted with the truth that the son of Anakin Skywalker lived, and he learned Luke's name. Now aware that Luke was his son, Vader understood why Obi-Wan had passed his old saber to him. Amid the rage he felt, Vader also felt his humanity stir, a tug on his conscience. Anakin would have wanted to protect his son. Vader, however, resisted the urge, reframing the impulse in service to the dark side, and decided that if Luke could be turned, he would no longer be alone. At the dawn of the Galactic Empire, one of its most important assets was the Inquisitors, a team of dark side Force users that hunted any Jedi that survived Order 66, as well as those who showed any signs of Force sensitivity. The exact number of Inquisitors over the years remains unknown, but there were certainly more than a dozen. For years, the Inquisitors killed countless Jedi Knights across the galaxy, under the supervision of Darth Vader. The idea that Vader was instructed to train a team of Force users is incredibly interesting, and it isn't something that we got to see very much of outside of the 2017 Vader comic series. However, there is a good amount of information revealed in the canon books The Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire and Inquisitor Rise of the Red Blade. So let's jump into this lore to learn about the formation of the Inquisitors and how Darth Vader brutally trained them to hunt Jedi. So you might be wondering why the Inquisitors needed to be trained at all, considering most of them were former Jedi. Wouldn't they already be skilled warriors in the Force? Technically, yes and no. Their former status as Jedi is very important. First, let's briefly explore how the Inquisitors were created. Although the Inquisitors weren't officially formed until after the Republic transitioned into the Empire, the concept had been in Palpatine's mind for quite some time. During the Clone Wars, he envisioned an army of Force users trained in the dark side, ready to serve him in every corner of the galaxy. As both Darth Sidious and Supreme Chancellor Palpatine, he began laying the groundwork for the Inquisitorius program years before becoming the Emperor. During the war, Palpatine employed spies to observe Jedi who held grievances against the Order or exhibited poor control over their emotions. The Sith Lord intended to exploit their weaknesses and offer them a chance at redemption by sparing their lives during Order 66 if they swore their allegiance to the Empire and the dark side. When Order 66 was initiated, that's precisely what he did. A handful of Jedi Knights he had observed over time were offered the chance to become Inquisitors through a hologram message, and the clone troopers spared their lives. Just as Palpatine had anticipated, some Jedi did manage to survive the Great Purge, so he decided to have his new warriors hunt them down until the Jedi were completely eliminated. Upon becoming Inquisitors, they lost their identities and were given numerical designations to represent their entry into the organization. Eventually, Darth Vader discovered the Inquisitors after he fought the Grand Inquisitor, a former Jedi Temple guard inside the Jedi Archives. The Emperor entrusted Vader with the task of training the Inquisitors in the ways of the dark side. However, Vader was immediately dissatisfied with the Inquisitors' fighting style, and as part of their training, he decided to cut off several of their body parts. After Vader severed the Sixth Brother's left arm, the Grand Inquisitor questioned the Sith Lord's training methods. Vader's brutal and unforgiving approach stemmed from the belief that the Inquisitors still fought like Jedi, employing defensive and disciplined tactics and only resorting to attack when they had no other choice. Vader aimed to correct this by employing aggressive training methods, such as removing limbs to teach the Inquisitors about the consequences of their actions. Through Vader's guidance, the Inquisitors developed their distinctive lightsaber fighting style, designed to swiftly overwhelm the defenses of their Jedi adversaries. This style employed broad slashes and sweeping motions to counter the Jedi's momentum, while swift parrying maneuvers compelled their opponents to retreat. Beyond combat, the Inquisitors employed psychological tactics, instilling fear and doubt through threats and reminders of past failures, disrupting the Jedi's concentration and hindering their ability to harness their Force powers effectively. Strong emotions could impede a Jedi's connection to the Force. While their fighting style proved effective against Jedi Padawans and less formidable Jedi Knights, experienced duelists like Ahsoka Tano or the former Sith Lord Maul effortlessly defeated the Inquisitors. Additionally, the Inquisitors received training in certain Force abilities, as they were required the ability to wield the dark side. However, they were acutely aware that they were not Sith. Palpatine had specifically selected that initial group of candidates because he recognized their limitations in challenging him or Vader. During their training under Vader, he deliberately withheld significant knowledge from them so that they could never challenge the Rule of Two. After his duel with Luke on Bespin, Darth Vader embarked on a quest to discover the truth of Padmé's death and learn how his son was hidden from him. The personal mission led him to Tatooine, Naboo, and finally Polis Massa, the medical facility where Padmé gave birth and died. While Vader did receive answers, watching footage of Padmé's death and hearing her claim there was still good within him only served to awaken his inner conflict. For the first time in over 20 years, Vader questioned his allegiance to the Sith as his soul was fractured. In the 2020 Darth Vader comic series, when Vader returned to face the Emperor, he was subjected to the full power of his master's wrath. Palpatine recited the old mantra that fear led to anger, anger led to hate, and hate led to strength. However, he stated that Vader had merely wallowed in grief. Thus, his apprentice needed to start over with fear. Attacking Vader with an immensely powerful blast of Sith lightning, Palpatine was pleased that Vader still defended himself. When Vader asked his master why he was attacking him, Mas Amida recalled Vader's actions on his personal mission. Vader had been sent to bring Luke to the dark side, but let him escape on Cloud City. Then he was summoned to report to the Emperor, but he instead left on his own mission. Vader discovered a rebel cell led by one of Padme's former handmaidens, whom he should have slaughtered. Instead, Vader also let her escape. Mas Amida stated that Vader's actions were at best failure and at worst treason. The Empire killed traitors. They commanded the Emperor's royal guards to attack Vader. As they began to fight, Palpatine took Vader's saber with the Force, commanding him to continue. The guards used their staffs to electrocute Vader's armor as he screamed in agony, yet he managed to fight them off. Vader gripped both guards and Mas Amida with the Force, choking them, which pleased Palpatine but was still not enough. Palpatine grasped Vader in a Force choke, taunting him, asking him how it felt to be so weak. He continued, remarking how Vader was supposed to be the Chosen One, destined to bring balance to the Force. But who chose the Chosen One, and why could they not choose another? Palpatine told him that he was simply a tool that could be discarded when it no longer functioned. Vader, in agony, said that Palpatine had lied about Padme's death, which elicited a laugh from his master. Palpatine replied that Vader had proved his point. He said it was Vader's fear of losing Padme that brought him to his side, and he had turned Vader's weakness into unimaginable strength. But now that weakness had returned to threaten everything that Vader had gained. Palpatine said he would teach Vader fear again to restore his power. Crushing his left arm and both of his legs, the very limbs he had lost on Mustafar, Palpatine told Vader to forget Padme, forget Luke, forget everything except his Emperor, and shattered the 3 limbs as Vader screamed in pain. Vader fell to the floor in a heap, mangled and broken, as Palpatine said that he needed to find himself again. Vader needed to relearn the primacy of power above all else, or he would die. Traveling to Mustafar, Palpatine had Vader deposited onto the very same lava bank he had rescued him from years before, the exact same spot that Obi-Wan had left him to die. As Vader's legs caught fire from the heat of the lava river, exactly as they had years before, Palpatine said that the last time Vader was broken, he found him and rebuilt him. But this time he needed to rebuild himself, using nothing but his own strength. As Vader screamed, Palpatine tossed his apprentice's saber onto the black sand, warning him that he was not allowed to use the Force at all during this entire lesson. As Palpatine left aboard his shuttle, Vader's vision flashed to his view of Obi-Wan walking away from him so many years before. Crawling using only his remaining arm, Vader inched closer to his saber, remembering how he had killed Obi-Wan on the Death Star, and imagining killing Palpatine in the same way. Except Palpatine did not die when Vader struck him. Instead, he laughed in Vader's face. Gripping his lightsaber, Vader summoned strength from his pain, and began crawling up the lava bank. Of course, that would not be enough to destroy Darth Vader. In the years following the rise of the Empire, Darth Vader was driven entirely by his pain and anger, and became obsessed with hunting down Jedi that had survived Order 66 and fled to hide across the galaxy. However, as time went on and more Jedi fell to his Crimson Blade, Vader began to lose his bloodlust as the Emperor urged him to leave his hatred for the Jedi behind. While he came to understand that the few Jedi survivors were not real threats to the Empire, Vader still enjoyed hunting and killing them in his own evil way. In the Legends Star Wars Tales comics, shortly before the Battle of Yavin, the Emperor informed Vader that one of the last surviving Jedi, known as the Dark Woman, had finally been found. Little did Vader know she would arguably be one of, if not the most powerful Jedi that he ever fought. Vader was summoned to Coruscant by the Emperor, and he knelt before his master's throne awaiting orders. Palpatine recalled how he had entrusted Vader with eliminating the remaining Jedi in order to break the final ties with the Old Republic. Vader replied that only a few Jedi remained after nearly 20 years, but Palpatine said that another had been found. Vader was skeptical, asking how, since his searches had yielded no results in the recent years. Palpatine said that while Vader was unable to locate any Jedi, the pawns that served him were numerous, and he had others besides Vader who served his needs. From the shadows came Mara Jade, one of the Emperor's hands and the future wife of Luke Skywalker in the expanded universe. Palpatine said that Mara could be resourceful in ways that Vader was not, since her methods were somewhat more delicate than his. Mara Jade said that she encountered a man who was trying to escape Imperial custody on Kuat, and he gave her valuable information, claiming a Jedi hid on the 5th planet of the Kafringan system in the Outer Rim. According to the man, the Jedi was called the Dark Woman. Vader knew of this Jedi, and eagerly stated that he must be the one to kill her. But Mara Jade interjected, insisting that as the Emperor's hand, the job should be hers. Vader replied that her meager Jedi training would not be enough to destroy the Dark Woman. Only the power of the dark side could defeat her. Ultimately, Palpatine agreed with Vader, insisting that he would not allow the rebels to use any surviving Jedi as a rallying symbol, and he commanded Vader to destroy the Dark Woman. As Vader agreed to his master's command and took his leave, Palpatine remarked to himself that he knew Vader would not fail him, since he knew something of the destruction of a Jedi, a sly reference to Anakin Skywalker's fall to the dark side. Sometime later, as Vader's shuttle touched down on Kofrigan 5, the Jedi Master sensed his presence in the Force. While Vader commanded his troops to remain with the ship, the Dark Woman instructed her animal friends to flee before the coming violence. As Vader trekked through the dense forest towards his prey, the Dark Woman prepared herself for battle. Finally, at the base of a large tree, Vader inspected a flower and was greeted by the Jedi. She was an older woman with white hair, and remarked that the flower was one of the last of its kind, like her. She commented on how she had tried to keep it alive until it could spread again, but that it required patience. Weeds would appear from time to time and threaten to choke out the flowers. Vader replied that extinction was the natural order of things, as weaker species were replaced by stronger ones. The Dark Woman said that some species would simply bide their time and bloom when one least expected it, perhaps like the Jedi. She told Vader that he would be surprised at what can be reclaimed. A seed long buried could still sprout and bear fruit, and he of all people should understand that. Vader stood behind her and said that there was no turning back once a dark path had been taken. As Vader ignited his lightsaber and posed for a killing blow, the Jedi replied that some paths were easier to walk for a coward. At the last instant, she ignited her purple blade and blocked Vader's strike behind her head, and their duel began as sparks flew from their clashing blades. She sprung away from him, and Vader commented that even after several years, she was still a worthy opponent. The Dark Woman replied that his skills were also considerable, given that he was more machine than man. Bolstered by the power of the Force, she somersaulted over Vader, trading blows. Vader said that she would have been an excellent disciple if she had learned the power of the dark side. As he flung boulders at her with the Force, she slashed the projectiles with her saber, saying that the dark side was simply easier and more seductive, but not more powerful. The light side of the Force could be just as tenacious. Suddenly, she commanded large vines to entangle Vader, pulling him down to the ground. The Dark Woman leapt at him, saying how the Emperor was about to lose his favorite pawn. Although he was restrained by the vines, Vader still managed to block her blow, before breaking free of their hold and striking her across the face. He asked where she could run that he would not follow. Their duel proceeded into a nearby waterfall, and the Dark Woman actually managed to disarm Vader. Without his saber, he grabbed her wrist before she could strike him, and he used his mechanical strength to crush it. Vader flung her to the side with ease, and then retrieved his saber from underwater with the Force, declaring that her power was nothing compared to his. As the Dark Woman lay on the ground, barely defending herself from his blows, Vader said that her words were empty now that she found herself trapped, just like every other Jedi. Vader sliced the trunk of the tree that she had retreated against, and then pulled the entire thing down with the power of the Force. The enormous trunk crushed the Jedi, leaving her broken and dying on the ground as blood spilled from her mouth. As the Dark Lord of the Sith lingered above her, she told him that it didn't need to be this way. Vader replied that there was no escape from the dark side, and she asked if he really believed that. Raising his arms above his head, Vader said that it was too late, and killed her with a single blow. He was shocked as her body instantly vanished, and he inspected her empty brown robe. Suddenly, a blue glow materialized behind him, and the Dark Woman appeared as a Force spirit, telling Vader to behold what he had made. She said that his power was nothing compared to hers. Calling him Skywalker, she told Vader to remember that even a faint light shined the brightest when it was surrounded by darkness. Vader attacked her spectral form, but his blade passed through harmlessly, and then the Dark Woman vanished for good, becoming one with the Force. Vader said nothing, simply walking away towards his ship and trampling the large flower that he had noticed earlier. Ignoring the Dark Woman's words about redemption, Vader returned to his Sith Master's side. The burden of being heralded as the chosen one of prophecy was something that weighed on Anakin Skywalker's shoulders from the moment he was brought before the Jedi Council. Supposedly destined to bring ultimate balance to the Force, the Jedi believed that Anakin would fulfill the prophecy by destroying the Sith once and for all. Yet the true meaning of balance or the prophecy itself was interpreted differently by some, and that uncertainty would be reflected in Anakin's own path as he fell to the dark side and became the Sith Lord Darth Vader. Nowhere in the prophecy did it say that the Chosen One would be a Jedi, yet it would seem that Anakin would not bring balance to the Force at all as a Dark Lord of the Sith. Interestingly enough, Vader's own thoughts on the prophecy, his supposed role as the Chosen One, and the Jedi Order are explained in the Legends novel Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader. A few weeks after his defeat on Mustafar, Vader meditated alone in his chambers, pondering all that had occurred during Order 66 and his confrontation with Padme and Obi-Wan on Mustafar. He wondered if he should cast blame on Palpatine for his injuries, but then realized that it was only Obi-Wan who had sentenced him to the prison of his armor. He was sentenced by his wife and his alleged best friend, their love for him warped by what they perceived as betrayal. Obi-Wan was simply too brainwashed by the Jedi to recognize the true power of the dark side. Vader knew that Palpatine's machinations and his own defection to the Sith had been essential to bring peace to the galaxy, essential to place power in the hands of those resourceful enough to use it properly, in order to save the galaxy from itself, to end the incompetence of the Senate, to dissolve the bloated and entitled Jedi Order, whose masters were blind to the decay that they had fostered. Vader wondered why he, their chosen one, had seen the truth, yet they had refused to follow his lead by embracing the dark side. He thought that the Jedi were simply too set in their ways, too inflexible to adapt. Vader's rage grew inside as he thought of the prophecy and of the Force itself. He had simply wanted to save everyone, yet they were too blind to see it. In the end, Everyone had failed to recognize his true power, to accept that he knew what was best for them. Instead, Vader was stripped of everything he once was, left without a purpose. Vader cursed the Force, wondering what it had ever brought him but pain, torturing him with premonitions, visions that he was unable to prevent, leading him to believe that he had great power and was destined to bring balance, when he was really little more than the Force's servant. But Vader promised himself that he would be a servant no longer. Through his own strength and the power of the dark side, he would render the Force subservient to him. Vader then thought to himself that while Anakin Skywalker had died on Coruscant, the Chosen One had truly died on Mustafar. Now, I think that this look into Vader's mind is incredible, and it's why I recommend that every single fan read this book. I think that Vader's thoughts could be interpreted a couple different ways. Perhaps he viewed his role in destroying the Jedi Order and forming the Empire as him fulfilling the prophecy and balancing the Force. Maybe Vader believed that it was the Jedi that needed to be destroyed and not the Sith in order to bring balance. Or perhaps Vader was so bitter and full of self-pity that he blamed the Force itself for his pain, and he renounced the prophecy and his role as the Chosen One. Either way, it's fairly clear that after the rise of the Empire, Vader either considered the prophecy fulfilled or didn't care about it at all, meaning that he did not consider himself to be the Chosen One, since he told himself that the Chosen One had died on Mustafar. Although he had renounced his former identity as Anakin Skywalker, hoping to fully embrace the dark side of the Force during the reign of the Empire, Darth Vader never managed to fully vanquish Anakin. The sacrifices that he had made, the things he had lost, and the horrible acts that he had performed inflicted deep psychological turmoil on him. He existed in a constant state of depression and emotional pain, as well as perpetual physical agony. Secretly in his mind, he grieved over the consequences of his decisions and mourned the loss of Padme, entering dreamlike visions of an alternate reality where he had never betrayed the Jedi. With the Sith destroyed by his own hand, Anakin became the youngest Grandmaster of the Jedi Order. Padme gave birth to their son, Jyn Skywalker, and became the Supreme Chancellor of the Republic. Vader would use these dreams of a false reality to keep himself sane during his everyday life, begging Padme to help him as he suffered through the reassembly of his cybernetic limbs and the use of his life support armor. While in the real world, he tried to focus on all of his rage and hatred in order to become more powerful through the dark side. However, his mind still truly held on to his love for Padme, increasing his psychological instability and his emotional distress. In 19 BBY, a few months after the end of the Clone Wars, Vader was summoned before the Emperor and tasked with locating Grand Moff Tarkin's son, Garrosh, who had gone missing while battling insurgents in the Atoan system. Vader departed Coruscant along with 2 battalions of the 501st Legion and headed for the Atoan system. He began his search for Tarkin's son on the planet Atoa, and after encountering local resistance organized by the natives, Vader met an Atoan priestess named Lady Sorrow, who offered to help them find who they were searching for. Lady Sorrow did not offer her assistance without a price, and she insisted that in exchange, Vader support her bid to become queen of the Atoan system. While he was initially enraged at her request, he could not harm her since she was his only lead, and he agreed to her terms. Thus, Lady Sorrow directed Vader to the location of Garrosh Tarkin's missing Star Destroyer. When Vader launched a rescue attempt with his forces on the unknown planet, he found himself ambushed and betrayed by Atoan insurgents, under the orders of Lady Sorrow. His soldiers suffered massive casualties, and although Vader managed to kill many of his attackers, he found himself overwhelmed and severely injured in an explosion. He was then captured alive by the Atoans. When he awoke, he found himself restrained and in the presence of Garrosh Tarkin. Vader asked why he was still alive, and Tarkin replied that Lady Sorrow had said that Vader would somehow be able to will himself back from the dead, and she hoped that he could still be turned to join their cause. Tarkin explained that he had joined Lady Sorrow's ranks shortly after he had been assigned to wipe out the insurgents of the Atoan system, and he planned to rule by Lady Sorrow's side. As Tarkin left him alone, Vader was suddenly struck by a vision of Padme. She called him Anakin and said that she knew he would one day destroy them both, remarking how broken he now was. Vader replied that he was only what his masters had made him, deflecting blame for the consequences of his actions, and Padme said that self-pity did not suit him. He became angry, telling her not to speak the name Anakin again, that Anakin was gone and had died with her. Turning, Padme replied that there was no one there for her then, and she left. Hysterical, Vader screamed for her to come back, finding the strength to break from his restraints and proceed into the cathedral. He searched down darkened tunnels until he found Padme again, hooded and waiting for him. She said that she had never left him, but he retorted that she did leave when she died. Removing her hood, Padme revealed her face, decayed by death, and she corrected that she did not die, he killed her. Dropping to his knees, Vader was overcome with grief, and he finally admitted that he had killed her himself. Confronting the truth, he said that he had also killed Anakin and their unborn child, and that he hated himself for what he had done. Padme referred to him as his Sith title now, and said that she forgave him, which caused Vader to shed a single tear for everything that he had lost. She vanished once more, causing Vader to become hysterical again as Garrosh Tarkin and Lady Sorrow revealed themselves. Vader realized that Lady Sorrow had somehow induced the visions, and she explained that she simply possessed the ability to see and let others see, which allowed Vader to speak to Padme's spirit. He demanded that she bring Padme back, but Lady Sorrow refused. Instead, she attempted to redeem Vader by appealing to his human side, asking that he spare their lives and the life of their unborn child. While Vader initially hesitated, he ultimately decided to kill them and leave his fate up to the will of the Force, and he used his powers to bring the entire cathedral crashing down on top of them. Days later, Vader awoke to find himself on Coruscant, having his cybernetics repaired in the presence of the Emperor. Palpatine was impressed that Vader had survived, and praised him for the results of the mission. The insurgents had been destroyed, and Grand Moff Tarkin believed that they had killed his son, making him an even better and more focused servant of the Empire. As Vader's cybernetics were attached, he did not need to imagine Padme any longer, and he told his master that the power of the dark side gave him all that he needed. Fully suited in his repaired armor, Vader dropped to one knee, awaiting new orders from his master. As enemies, Anakin Skywalker and Count Dooku clashed many times during the Clone Wars. Anakin's hatred of Dooku even pushed him closer to the dark side over the course of the 3-year conflict, as Dooku had orchestrated assassination attempts against Padme and taken Anakin's arm on Geonosis. In their final confrontation, Anakin was able to use that hatred, bolstered by his fear of losing Obi-Wan and his anger over his lost arm, to defeat Dooku and execute him. There was a much larger significance to that defeat, however, as Anakin cemented himself as Dooku's replacement as the Sith apprentice of Darth Sidious. After becoming the Sith Lord Darth Vader, during the early days of the Galactic Empire after the end of the Clone Wars, one of Vader's first missions was to Sereno, Dooku's homeworld. There, Vader decided to take further revenge against the Count by punishing the Dooku family and all of the other great houses in an event that would come to be known as the Cleansing of Sereno. Vader summoned the heads of Sereno's great houses and their eldest sons to meet with him as a representative of the Empire, where Vader marked them all as traitors for supporting Count Dooku as he led the Separatist forces, for which they needed to answer for. The head of House Borgin protested, insisting that Dooku's position had made it impossible for them to defy him. Borgin said that Dooku possessed a formidable will and unmatched skills of persuasion, and that the other families had had no choice but to support him during the Clone Wars. Vader retorted that there was always a choice, stating how Aiden Dooku and his mother had gone into exile when Count Dooku had resumed his title on Sereno after leaving the Jedi Order, and any of them could have done the same, but did not. Vader then announced that they would be offered a choice. Each heir of a given house would assume the title of head of their house by killing the current title holder, and if any refused, all would die. Vader ignited his red lightsaber to emphasize his seriousness. All of the families immediately protested as the crowd shouted simultaneously, insisting that Vader's demands were preposterous. Aiden Dooku told Vader that the idea was barbaric, to which the Sith Lord coldly replied that the rest of the galaxy had suffered, so Sereno would too, with its houses being cleansed by blood. It was Rodas Borgin, heir to House Borgin, that acted first, drawing a knife from his belt and plunging it into his father's back as he yelled in anguish. For a moment, they all watched the elder Borgin's body fall, and then the slaughter began. The heirs of each house brutally murdered their fathers. Afterwards, they were all forced to kneel in the blood they had spilled and swear fealty to the new head of House Dooku, Count Aiden Dooku. Vader had only spared Aiden Dooku's life because he had been raised away from Sereno in hiding for most of his life. With Aiden Dooku acting as the liege lord over all other great houses on Sereno, the leadership of the planet was brought under the control of the Empire. The rest of the galaxy never learned the truth of Vader's actions there, or what really happened during the cleansing of Sereno. After the rise of the Empire, stripped of everything he had once been, Darth Vader existed only to serve Darth Sidious. His psyche cleaved in two by the dark side, Vader became a creature controlled by rage. Struggling to embrace his new existence as a Dark Lord of the Sith, Vader found himself obsessed with locating and destroying any Jedi that had survived Order 66, something that Sidious didn't approve of. In the Legends book Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader, this is a major focus, as Vader hunts down a group of Jedi survivors. Interestingly enough, this book reveals how and why Vader finally let go of his obsession with the Jedi, and lost his need to hunt them so viciously. As I mentioned, Sidious was disappointed with Vader's obsession with the Jedi. He told his new apprentice that the Jedi meant nothing to them, including Yoda and Obi-Wan. Sidious knew that dozens of Jedi must have survived the Purge, and that over time, Vader would indeed kill them. But to Sidious, the only important thing was that the Jedi Order as a whole had been destroyed. By hiding and running for their lives, the surviving Jedi humbled themselves before the Sith, and Sidious intended to let them, as atonement for 1,000 years of arrogance and self-absorption. But Vader did not agree. He believed that any surviving Jedi were major threats to the new Empire, and that Sidious was simply too blind to the fact because he had been victorious in his grand plans. Vader knew that some Jedi, the ones still devoted to their code and blinded by duty, would attempt to band together and restore the Order. Eventually, Vader found the Jedi he had been hunting on Kashyyyk, and a major conflict erupted between Imperial forces and the Wookiees. This is where it gets really interesting. Vader's greatest desire had been to catch the group of Jedi and kill them all, but in truth, Sidious was manipulating his apprentice yet again, hoping that Vader would learn an important lesson on Kashyyyk. When Vader defeated the Jedi Master Roan Shern, instead of killing him quickly, he took the time to speak to Shern. Shern, knowing that he was about to die, requested that Vader tell him the truth about the Clone Wars and Darth Sidious. So, Vader revealed that Emperor Palpatine was Sidious. Not only that, but he also told Shern that he was once the Jedi Knight Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One. As Shern lay dying from his injuries, grappling with the revelation that the Sith Lord before him was Skywalker, Vader felt a deep change within himself, like a newfound satisfaction and closure. He was glad that Shern would die, knowing that the Jedi Order was betrayed by one of its own. More important, Vader's bloodlust had been appeased, replaced by self-possession of a sort he had never experienced. It was as if he had crossed some invisible threshold to a new world. He could feel the power of the dark side surging through him like an icy torrent. He felt invulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with his Durasteel prosthesis or his suit of armor. Interestingly, it had taken another Jedi to usher him over that threshold. Sidious sensed this change in Vader and was pleased. Now that Vader had begun to tap deeply into the power of the dark side, his true apprenticeship could begin. Later, aboard his Star Destroyer, Vader observed the galaxy. The Jedi no longer mattered to him. They were no different from other enemies who would interfere in the business of the Empire. His mission was only to maintain order, so that the dark side could continue to reign supreme. Anakin was gone, a memory so deeply buried he might have dreamed it rather than lived it. Just as Sidious had promised, Vader was now fully married to the Order of the Sith, and needed no other companion than the dark side of the Force. He embraced all that he had done to bring balance, by dismantling the Republic and destroying the Jedi, and he reveled in his new power. There would come a day where he and Sidious would be equals, and Vader would take an apprentice of his own to help him topple Sidious from his throne. The thought gave Vader something to live for. Contrary to popular belief, Force healing is not something that Lucasfilm created recently. While the first times that we saw it used on screen were in The Mandalorian and The Rise of Skywalker, the ability to heal injuries with the Force has been part of the expanded Star Wars lore for decades. There's even an old Clone Wars book called Jedi Healer, and one of Luke's students in the Legends Jedi Academy trilogy was a healer that saved Mon Mothma from a poisonous disease with the Force. But anyway, this video isn't about them, it's about Darth Vader, and possibly one of the earliest examples of Force healing in Star Wars. This lore comes from 1996's Shadows of the Empire, the Legends book that told the story of what happened between episodes 5 and 6. Keep in mind that this book released before the prequel trilogy, so this is even before we knew exactly what happened to Vader to cause all of his injuries on Mustafar. Suffering greatly for the rest of his life and relying on bacta tanks and his hyperbaric chambers, Vader was unable to heal himself completely using any medical methods. That's why he would attempt to heal his injuries not with bacta or other surgeries or cybernetics, but with the Force. Specifically, as a Sith Lord, he attempted to use the dark side of the Force, which is incredibly interesting. Before we jump straight into the scene with Vader from Shadows of the Empire, I want to examine what we know about Force healing, at least in Legends, in order to align with this book, using the encyclopedia Jedi vs. Sith: The Essential Guide to the Force. I think this will add a good amount of insight and understanding into Vader's attempts through the dark side specifically. The ancient Jedi learned that the power of the Force could be used to ease pain, heal wounds, and cure various afflictions, and that these healing arts were effective on all living beings. As with other Force powers, some Jedi had a natural ability as healers, though it was uncommon. Some Jedi could even use a Force technique called the Art of the Small, producing natural antitoxins by manipulating things at a molecular level. Other Jedi had learned to place themselves into trances for long periods of time to accelerate the healing process. Notice how all of these healing methods refer to Jedi, meaning they flow through the light side of the Force. Now let's take a look at what Vader attempted to do through the dark side. Darth Vader sat naked inside his hyperbaric medical chamber. The interior lighting was turned off, and he was free of the armor that he had to wear to sustain himself in public. The Force was powerful. Vader thought the dark side even more so, but he had never been able to use it to heal his badly burned body to the extent that he wished. That he was alive at all was something of a miracle, but he had somehow failed to master the energies needed for complete regeneration. He believed that it was possible, that with sufficient meditation and training, he would someday be able to rebuild himself into the man he had once been. Physically, at least. He would never go back to what he had been mentally, weak, foolish, and idealistic. Anakin had been much like Luke Skywalker was now, mere potential. He decided it was time for another test. Vader waved his hand over the motion-sensitive controls in his chamber. The spherical chamber opened and the lid lifted with a hydraulic hiss and escape of pressurized air. He sat exposed to the surrounding room, unprotected by the super-medicated and oxygenated field inside the chamber. He concentrated on the injustice of his condition, on his hatred of Obi-Wan, who had made him so. With the anger and hatred, the dark side of the Force permeated Vader. For a moment, his ruined tissues altered. His scarred lungs and dead cells and constricted passages smoothed out and became whole. For a moment, he could breathe as normal beings breathed. His sense of relief, his triumph, his joy at being able to do so drove the dark side from him as surely as a light chases away shadow. The dark side eagerly consumed anger, but it was poisoned by happiness. It left him, and when it did, he could breathe no longer. Vader waved his hand, and the half-dome lowered and sealed him into the chamber once again. He had achieved it briefly, as he had done several times before over the years. The trick was to maintain it. He must not allow himself to feel relief, but must somehow cling to his rage even as he healed. It was difficult. He had not purged all of Anakin Skywalker, that blemished and frail man from whom he had been born. Until he did, he could never give himself over totally to the dark side. It was his greatest weakness, his most terrible flaw. A single spot of light amid the dark that he had been unable to eradicate over all the years, no matter how hard he tried. Vader sighed. He would have to try harder. He could not afford any weaknesses given his enemies, and more especially, given his friends. So I just think that this passage is incredibly interesting and really expands upon what we know about the dark side. I think most people would assume Force healing is an ability that can only be used through the light side of the Force. After all, the dark side is corruption of the Force. It only affects the user negatively and can even disfigure them physically over time. To see that Vader had actually managed to use it to heal himself on multiple occasions is fascinating. But given what we've seen other Sith Lords do, it's not that far-fetched. If Maul was able to use his anger and hatred through the Force to survive being cut in half, why wouldn't Vader be able to heal his lungs? I feel that this ability through the dark side is somewhat similar to the Sith alchemy that we've seen across both Legends and Canon, like Vitiate being able to drain other life forces and live for 1,000 years, or Palpatine maintaining his consciousness in clone bodies. But overall, the most interesting part is how Vader was unable to maintain his anger and therefore his connection to the dark side in order to make the healing permanent. Since he felt relieved and even happy whenever he did heal himself, the healing would reverse immediately as the dark side withdrew from him. I think that's so interesting, specifically for Vader, because it shows that there was that small part of Anakin always inside of him. Anyway, let me know what you guys think of this story. Do you think Force healing through the dark side should be possible, or should it be something that only the light side grants? How do you feel about Vader being able to heal himself completely, as opposed to Maul surviving being cut in half? During his time as a Jedi Knight, Anakin Skywalker was regarded as one of the best swordsmen within the Order. As the Padawan of Obi-Wan Kenobi, Anakin inherited a plethora of knowledge in the traditions of lightsaber combat, allowing him to incorporate elements from many masters of the past into his swordplay. By the time of the Clone Wars, Anakin achieved mastery of Form 5. However, his skill in Gem So was not enough to defeat Obi-Wan on Mustafar once he had become Darth Vader. After suffering gruesome injuries and being placed inside his life support suit of armor, Vader's lightsaber skill was never the same as it was. However, he did learn to overcome his physical limitations, developing his own hybrid form of lightsaber combat. But before we dive into his time as Vader, it's important to understand just how skilled Anakin was as a Jedi, and what exactly the specifics of Form 5 were. As Anakin progressed in his training, both variants of Form 5, Xian and Gem So, became his preferred styles. Form 5 had been developed as an improvement on the defensive Form 3, Sorisu, which required users to wait for an opportunity to strike instead of creating their own openings. The creators of Form 5 instead focused on using powerful attacks and quick counterattacks. Xian was considered the classical variant of Form 5, and focused on blocking blaster bolts. Gem So was developed later, and was specifically intended for use in lightsaber combat. Both variants were designed to use an opponent's attack against them, as Xian allowed for directing blaster bolts back at their origin, and Gem So prioritized immediate counterattacks after a defensive move. As Anakin progressed quickly through his training, his natural skill fed his ego, to the point that he even considered himself to be as good as Grandmaster Yoda. His skill in Xian served him well during the Battle of Geonosis, as he defended against blaster fire from an army of droids. However, Anakin was humbled when he faced Count Dooku. Reverting back to Form 5 after he briefly wielded two lightsabers and utilized Form 4, Ataru, Anakin was able to face Dooku even longer than Obi-Wan was, but was defeated and lost his arm. During the time of the Clone Wars, Anakin spent years developing and honing his skills with a lightsaber, focusing mostly on Gem So. As he utilized it more frequently, using brute strength and aggression to dominate his enemies, Anakin drew on his negative emotions constantly, pushing him progressively closer to the dark side. This reached a tipping point when he confronted Dooku for the final time, and after tapping into his anger and fear, he was able to defeat the Sith Lord and sever both of his hands. Before Dooku died, he realized that Anakin was the finest master of Gem So that he had ever seen. Once Anakin fell to the dark side, becoming the Sith Lord Darth Vader, his mastery of Gem So was brutally bolstered by the power of the darkness, and he became a terrifying warrior. However, that raw power was not enough to defeat his former master on Mustafar, and his aggression became his most fatal flaw. Vader was younger, stronger, and possessed more raw power in the Force than anyone, yet he lacked the experience and focus that Obi-Wan had. Obi-Wan was also the definitive master of the defensive form Sorisu, and Vader's mounting emotions, such as his frustration with being unable to penetrate Obi-Wan's defense, caused him to become distracted as their duel went on. He began making mistakes, and his clouded judgment eventually caused him to make the crucial error of attempting to jump over Obi-Wan, leading to the loss of his limbs and his immolation on the lava bank. After being reborn and adapting to his new suit of armor, Vader initially relied on only his physical strength and bulk provided by the armor, utilizing a clumsy method of stiff vertical strikes with his lightsaber. Through sheer power, he sought to wear down his opponents, similar to Anakin's use of Gem So, but not refined at all. Vader sought to quickly overcome the physical limitations of his armor, developing a version of Gem So that incorporated the elements of many different forms. Instead of attempting to fight against his bulky armor, Vader fought with it, using its weight and powerful cybernetics to deliver blows with incredible strength. With the new hybrid form that he developed, Vader utilized killing blows, demonstrating incredible precision and speed. Although the added weight and bulk of his armor typically caused him to refrain from practicing the acrobatics of Ataru, Vader was still fully capable of doing so when he needed to. As he utilized his new form over time, he sometimes opted to fight one-handed, employing a version of Form 2, Makashi, that relied on precision, using his prosthetics to maintain immense power in his strikes. When he was forced onto the defensive, he would switch to his own variation of Sorisu, keeping his elbows at his sides and holding his blade straight out in front of him, which protected his vulnerable chest box. While he utilized his hybrid form to great effect, Vader also learned from his mental mistakes in lightsaber combat, mastering his emotions while fighting. He no longer allowed himself to be blinded by rage, instead attacking with determination and relentlessness bolstered by the power of the dark side, allowing him to become a terrifying Dark Lord as he mastered his ultimate lightsaber form. When Anakin Skywalker returned home to Tatooine, desperate to save his mother from an uncertain doom, he met the Lars family. Shmi had been purchased and then freed and married by Klieg Lars, and it was Klieg who told Anakin of the terrible fate that had befell his mother when she was abducted by Tusken Raiders. Obviously, Anakin was too late to save her from death, and his wrath was unleashed upon the entire Tusken camp. One detail that isn't touched on in the film is Anakin's feelings towards the Lars family afterwards, and how his anger would come to fruition with the death of Owen and Beru at the hands of Imperial stormtroopers. Insane details are provided in the Legends book The Rise and Fall of Darth Vader, showing Anakin's internal rage and Vader's brutality. When Anakin arrived back at the Lars homestead with his mother's blanket-wrapped body, Klieg Lars, Owen, Beru, Padme, and C-3PO emerged from the entry dome. They watched in silence as he lifted his dead mother from the bike and carried her toward the dome's doorway. Anakin was in no mood to talk, and he had reconsidered his assessment that the Lars family was made up of good people. Anakin asked himself what was the advantage of being good if you were weak. His grim, scowling expression locked on to Klieg Lars, who lowered his gaze. Anakin angrily thought that perhaps Klieg was wishing he hadn't given up on Shmi so soon. Without breaking stride, he redirected his glare to Owen and Beru. The two of them must have never been taught how to take care of things. Anakin didn't even look at Padme or C-3PO as he descended with his mother into the underground dwelling, his resentment for the weak Lars family at a boiling point. That rage that he felt and the blame he cast upon them would resurface again, as Darth Vader and the Empire pursued the stolen Death Star plans on Tatooine. After meeting with Imperial leaders aboard the Death Star, Vader was informed that he had an incoming transmission from the Tatooine system. He had already been notified that Commander Praji's stormtrooper squad had learned that the Tantive 4's missing escape pod had carried 2 droids to Tatooine's surface, and that the droids had been picked up by a Jawa sandcrawler. Vader walked over to a communications console, where a holo projector flickered to life and projected an image of 2 fully armed Imperial sandtroopers standing beside a middle-aged man and woman, who wore robes and were kneeling on the ground. Near the 4 figures, there was a partial view of a structure, which Vader recognized as an entry dome for a desert dwelling. Vader ordered the Sandtrooper squad leader to report, and was informed that the Jawas had sold 2 droids to the moisture farmers they had captured. Intrigued, Vader examined the holograms of the kneeling couple and asked for their names. The Sandtrooper responded that they were Owen and Beru Lars. The resolution of their holograms was clear enough that he could make out their worn, weathered features. Neither of them appeared to be comfortable having blaster rifles aimed at their backs. Remembering how they'd looked on the day Anakin Skywalker had met them, Vader thought that the years and Tatooine's twin sons had not been kind to them. He resolved that it was time for them to pay for their repeated weaknesses. When the Sand Trooper asked for Vader's orders, the Dark Lord replied that they could extend to the farmers every courtesy they had showed the Jawas, and then continue their search in the nearby spaceports. He also commanded that the troopers not stop transmitting until he broke the connection himself. Vader watched as the Sand Troopers carried out his brutal orders on their helpless victims, executing Owen and Beru with their blasters and then burning their bodies with flamethrowers. He found the sight of the rising flames, even holograms of flames burning light years away, to be most satisfying. When the Lars family homestead had been transformed into an inferno and Vader was pleased, he deactivated the holoprojector and left the room. So honestly, this is just an insane detail that adds some incredible weight to Owen and Beru's death, as well as Luke's story in the original trilogy. It brings up the question as to if Luke ever found out that Vader was directly responsible for having Owen and Beru killed. Would Luke have been able to forgive his father for that too? How would that information have changed things if Luke found out during the original trilogy? Darth Vader's injuries he suffered on Mustafar were incredibly extensive, as his entire body was practically ruined and he needed to rely on his life support armor to survive. While it is graphically shown that he burned alive, the true extent and severity of his injuries isn't blatantly explained in the films. However, in the Legends book Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader, there is an entire scene from Vader's perspective revealing his thoughts on his injuries and his armor. Vader stood for a long moment with his sheathed arms dangling at his sides, his head mournfully bowed. To the galaxy at large, Jedi Knight Anakin Skywalker, the hero with no fear, the Chosen One, had died on Coruscant during the siege of the Jedi Temple. And to some extent, that was true. Anakin is dead, Vader told himself. And yet, if not for events on Mustafar, Anakin would sit now on the Coruscant throne, his wife by his side, their child in her arms. Instead, Palpatine's plan could not have been more flawlessly executed. He had won it all: the war, the Republic, the fealty of the one Jedi Knight in whom the entire Jedi Order had placed its hope. The revenge of the self-exiled Sith had been complete, and Darth Vader was merely a minion, an errand boy, allegedly an apprentice, the public face of the dark side of the Force. While he retained his knowledge of the Jedi arts, he felt uncertain about his place in the Force. And while he had taken his first steps toward awakening the power of the dark side, he felt uncertain about his ability to sustain that power. How far he might have been now had fate not intervened to strip him of almost everything he possessed, as a means of remaking him. Or of humbling him, as Darth Maul and Tyrannus had been humbled before him, as indeed the Jedi Order itself had been humbled. Where Darth Sidious had gained everything, Vader had lost everything, including, for the moment at least, the self-confidence and unbridled skill he had demonstrated as Anakin Skywalker. Vader turned and began to move from the room. But this is not walking, he thought. Long accustomed to building and rebuilding droids, supercharging the engines of land speeders and starfighters, upgrading the mechanisms that controlled the first of his artificial limbs, he was dismayed by the incompetence of the medical droids responsible for his resurrection in Sidious' laboratory on Coruscant. His alloy lower legs were bulked by strips of armor similar to those that filled and gave form to the long glove Anakin had worn over his right arm. What remained of his real limbs ended in bulbs of grafted flesh, inserted into machines that triggered movement through the use of modules that interfaced with his damaged nerve endings. But instead of using Durasteel, the medical droids had substituted an inferior alloy, and had failed to inspect the strips that protected the electromotive lines. As a result, the inner lining of the pressurized bodysuit was constantly snagging on places where the strips were anchored to knee and ankle joints. The tall boots were a poor fit for his artificial feet, whose claw-like toes lacked the electrostatic sensitivity of his equally false fingertips. Raised in the heel, the cumbersome footgear canted him slightly forward, forcing him to move with exaggerated caution lest he tumble or topple over. Worse, they were so heavy that he often felt rooted to the ground, or as if he were moving in high gravity. What good was motion of this sort if he was going to have to call on the Force even to walk from place to place? He may as well have resigned himself to using a repulsor chair and abandoned any hope of movement. The defects in his prosthetic arms mirrored those of his legs. Only the right one felt natural to him, though it too was artificial, and the pneumatic mechanisms that supplied articulation and support were sometimes slow to respond. The weighty cloak and pectoral plating so restricted his movement that he could scarcely lift his arms over his head, and he had already been forced to adapt his lightsaber technique to compensate. He could probably adjust the servo drivers and pistons in his forearms to provide his hands with strength enough to crush the hilt of his new lightsaber. With the power of his arms alone, he had the ability to lift an adult being off the ground. But the Force had always given him the ability to do that, especially in moments of rage. What's more, the sleeves of the bodysuit didn't hug the prostheses as they should, and the elbow-length gloves sagged and bunched at the wrists. Gazing at the gloves now, he thought, this is not seeing. The pressurized mask was goggle-eyed, fish-mouthed, short-snouted, and needlessly angular over the cheekbones. Coupled with a flaring dome of helmet, the mask gave him the forbidding appearance of an ancient Sith war droid. The dark lenses that covered his eyes filtered out light that might have caused further injury to his damaged corneas and retinas, but in enhanced mode, they reddened the light and prevented him from being able to see the toes of his boots without inclining his head almost 90 degrees. Listening to the servo motors that drove his limbs, he thought, this is not hearing. The Medroids rebuilt the cartilage of his outer ears, but his eardrums, having melted in Mustafar's heat, had been beyond repair. Sound waves now had to be transmitted directly to implants in his inner ear, and sounds registered as if issuing from underwater. Worse, the implanted sensors lacked sufficient discrimination, so that too many ambient sounds were picked up, and their distance and direction were difficult to determine. Sometimes the sensors needled him with feedback, or attached echo or vibrato effects to even the faintest noise. Allowing his lungs to fill with air, he thought, this is not breathing. Here, the Medroids had truly failed him. From a control box he wore strapped to his chest, a thick cable entered his torso, linked to a breathing apparatus and heartbeat regulator. The ventilator was implanted in his hideously scarred chest, along with tubes that ran directly into his damaged lungs, and others that entered his throat, so that should the chest plate or belt control panels develop a glitch, he could breathe unassisted for a limited time. But the monitoring panel beeped frequently and for no reason, and the constellation of lights served only as steady reminders of his vulnerability. The incessant rasp of his breathing interfered with his ability to rest, let alone sleep. And sleep, in the rare moments it came to him, was a nightmarish jumble of twisted, recurrent memories that unfolded to excruciating sounds. The Medroids had at least inserted the redundant breathing tubes low enough so that, with the aid of an enunciator, his scorched vocal cords could still form sounds and words. But absent the enunciator, which imparted a synthetic bass tone, his own voice was little more than a whisper. He could take food through his mouth as well, but only when he was inside a hyperbaric chamber, since he had to remove the triangular respiratory vent that was the mask's prominent feature. So it was easier to receive nourishment through liquids, intravenous and otherwise, and to rely on catheters, collection pouches, and recyclers to deal with his waste. But all those devices made it even more difficult for him to move with ease, much less with any grace. The pectoral armor that protected the artificial lung weighed him down, as did the electrode-studded collar that supported the outsized helmet. necessary to safeguard the cybernetic devices that replaced the uppermost of his vertebrae, the delicate systems of the mask, and the ragged scars in his hairless head, which owed as much to what he had endured on Mustafar as to attempts at emergency trephination during the trip back to Coruscant aboard Sidious's shuttle. The synth skin that substituted for what was seared from his bones itched incessantly, and his body needed to be periodically cleansed and scrubbed of necrotic flesh. Already he had experienced moments of claustrophobia, moments of desperation to be rid of the suit, to emerge from the shell. He needed to build, or have built, a chamber in which he could feel human again, if possible. All in all, he thought, this is not living. This was solitary confinement, prison of the worst sort, continual torture. He was nothing more than wreckage. Power without clear purpose. When Darth Vader laid his trap for the rebels on Bespin, hoping to lure Luke in, he was also reunited with C-3PO, the droid he had built in his youth as Anakin Skywalker. There were few relics of the past that reminded Vader of his life as Anakin, yet 3PO was one of them that remained. Fans have wondered if Vader had recognized the droid on Cloud City, and at least in the Legends continuity, there is an answer. In the comic series Star Wars Tales and the book The Rise and Fall of Darth Vader, it's revealed that Vader did recognize 3PO when he was presented with the droid's broken parts. As Vader and Boba Fett waited while the Imperials took their positions around Cloud City, they received word that one of the rebels' droids had fallen behind and stumbled upon a stormtrooper squad. The troopers had destroyed it, but luckily Leia, Han, and Chewie had not heard. Enraged, Vader commanded them to bring the droid to him at once, as its memory could contain valuable information. The lieutenant returned quickly with an open-topped container that held the captured droid's parts. The limbs had been torn from the torso, and a tangle of multicolored wires stuck out from the droid's neck socket. Lieutenant Shekel stated that the damage was extensive, and that the droid was probably made a long time ago, as he held up 3PO's head for Vader to see. Vader took the droid's head and examined it closely. Despite the wear and tear to the head, Vader recognized a few small details that indicated Anakin Skywalker's handiwork. He gazed into the decapitated droid's blank photoreceptors. It was C-3PO. The last time Vader had seen the golden droid was on Mustafar, as he recalled how he had seen 3PO through the window of Padme's ship as it landed. Holding this relic of his former life, Vader felt waves of anger and loss sweep over his dark soul. His memory flashed to the day that Anakin had found the droid's skeleton in Watto's junkyard, and Anakin had wondered if the repaired droid might help him and his mother leave Tatooine. Vader wondered whether C-3PO remembered anything of Anakin Skywalker. He doubted it. If the droid had had any knowledge of Anakin in his memory banks, then he would have shared it with Luke. But Vader was certain that Luke still remained ignorant of his father's true identity. As he looked into the droid's eyes, Vader thought that he should have left it in the scrapyard all those years ago. He had the sudden urge to crush the droid's head, but then realized that Lieutenant Shekel and Boba Fett were watching him closely. When Shekel inquired if he should have their technicians recover the droid's memory, Vader replied that the droid was useless and ordered them to destroy it. Returning 3PO's head to the container, Vader left the room, ordering Boba Fett to follow him as they prepared for their meeting with Lando Calrissian. The next day, after capturing the rebels and sensing that Luke was on his way to rescue them, Vader was informed that 3PO's parts had been found in Princess Leia's chambers. He was displeased that his order for the droid's destruction had not been fulfilled, and Lieutenant Shekel informed him that Chewbacca had retrieved the droid's parts, perhaps suggesting it was very important. Reaching into the storage bin, Vader picked up the droid's head again. Despite his desire to leave all of Anakin Skywalker's memories buried, another one surfaced, something Shmi Skywalker had told her son after she allowed him to keep the droid parts he had recovered. She told him that unless he was prepared to care for something, he didn't deserve to have it. Under his helmet, Vader winced at the memory. Watching Vader, Shekel asked again if the technicians should search the droid's memory, or if they should destroy it. Vader seemed to continue contemplating the droid's head, holding it closer to his helmet so he could see his dark, distorted reflection on the weathered gold surface of 3PO's lifeless face. He then slowly returned the head to the bin. Vader instructed Shekel to deliver the box to Chewbacca's cell. Shekel was very confused, and Vader mysteriously elaborated that he was giving the Wookiee what he deserved, before exiting the room to interrogate Han Solo. Darth Vader's armor was designed to protect and sustain the Sith Lord after his defeat on Mustafar. The suit acted as a life support system, encasing him completely and separating him from the outside world. While the suit was uncomfortable and incredibly painful, eventually Vader learned to live with it. The technology of the suit and cybernetics was outdated and was purposefully poorly made by the Emperor. This was to ensure that Vader would always be restricted and he could never try to overthrow the Emperor. The suit itself was incredibly sensitive to electrical charges, meaning that the Emperor could completely immobilize and hurt Vader with Force lightning if he needed to. With all of the shortcomings and weaknesses of the suit, one question is, why did Vader never upgrade his suit over time? He wore the same version of armor for over 20 years, yet he never changed it to be more comfortable or stronger. Or did he? First, before we get into the upgrades, I'd like to include a portion of a past video that explains Vader's injuries and the function of his suit in detail, to really give an understanding of just how poorly made the suit was. As Vader adjusted to life in his suit, he would bitterly think to himself that every one of his movements were abominations, and he was dismayed by the incompetence of the medical droids that had rebuilt him into the armor. For his mechanical legs, the droids had used an inferior alloy instead of Durasteel, and they failed to inspect the strips of metal that covered the electrical wiring. As a result, the inner lining of his suit would constantly snag on his knee and ankle joints as he walked. The boots of his suit did not fit the mechanical feet, and they were raised in the heel, leaning him forward and forcing him to move with caution so he didn't stumble or fall over. It was so difficult for him to walk that he needed to call upon the Force for assistance, which infuriated him. His mechanical arms restricted his movement too, and they inhibited him so much that he couldn't even raise them above his head. While Vader knew that he could adjust them to deliver enhanced physical strength, he was not impressed by that, since he had always possessed the ability to crush anything through the power of the Force. He felt a seething hatred for his mask and helmet, which he despised the design of. He felt that it was needlessly angular, and with the helmet attached, he had to look down at almost a 90-degree angle just to see his feet. Because his eardrums had melted on Mustafar, sound waves were transmitted through implants inside his mask, but they distorted everything and made it sound as though he was underwater. Because the audio sensors were poor at distinction, Vader found it incredibly difficult to determine the distance and direction of whatever he was hearing. Despite all of these limitations and failures, he considered the biggest flaw to be his breathing apparatus. From the control box that stabbed through his chest, a thick cable entered directly into his torso, connecting his respirator and a heartbeat regulator. His chest also housed an implanted ventilator, with tubes running directly into his scorched lungs and into his throat. This additional tubing allowed for him to breathe unassisted for a limited amount of time if his suit ever encountered a glitch or stopped working. Now, in regards to Vader not upgrading his suit, there is a specific explanation given in the Legends book Death Star. In Year Zero, Vader was given the opportunity to have a new suit built for him, essentially acting as a 2.0 version of his old armor. The new suit would have been much more advanced, technologically superior, and more comfortable than his original armor. However, in order to be placed into the new suit, he would have to have his prosthetics and his life support systems disconnected and disabled for an extended period of time. Since the process of transference between suits was considered very risky and most likely would result in his death, he decided not to proceed. While this is essentially the main reason that Vader never upgraded to a new suit of armor, there is another reason he had for enduring the agony of his original armor. The perpetual pain and the anger it caused him made him stronger in the dark side. By being isolated from the world and existing in a constant state of distress, Vader was able to focus solely on honing his power in the dark side of the Force, which is exactly what Palpatine intended for him in the armor. After losing his second Jedi lightsaber to Obi-Wan on Mustafar, Darth Vader was forced to build a new one to use as a Sith Lord during the reign of the Empire. One interesting detail is how similar Vader's saber looked to Anakin's first lightsaber, which is something that is explained in the Legends books Jedi Quest and Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader. To understand why the sabers are so similar in design, it's important to first know the origin of Anakin's first lightsaber and how he built it. I've actually already made a previous video explaining this full story, so I'll insert a clip here just for context, but I'll also add a card if you'd like to watch the full video. Anakin sat on the ground, listening to Obi-Wan's guiding words, and began to construct the lightsaber. However, once Anakin closed his eyes, Obi-Wan's form vanished and changed, becoming the Sith Lord Darth Maul.
Did I startle you? Perhaps you need to work on those Jedi reflexes. You're almost as clumsy as Qui-Gon Jinn.
Anakin prepared to battle the Spectre, reaching for his training saber, yet Maul snatched it with the Force, sending it into the wall and destroying it. He tossed Anakin a new lightsaber, taunting him and stoking his rage.
Why do you fear your anger? Why do you fear your hate? Perhaps you're afraid your new toy won't work. I can feel it. You hate me. It is natural after all. I gutted your friend like an animal.
Igniting the saber that Maul had given him, Anakin engaged the Vision in a lightsaber duel. As their blades clashed, Anakin wrestled with his own anger as Maul taunted him relentlessly.
You see what anger can do. It gives you power. It is something you can use like a weapon. You thought the same thing a moment ago. Why deny it?
Anakin, remembering his Jedi teaching, resisted the dark urges of the Vision. He told Maul that he would let his anger go, and he did not seek power because he was a Jedi.
Then you lie. How else will you save the poor mother you abandoned if you do not have power?
Anakin sliced through the Spectre, but the blade did no harm.
Don't you remember, boy? I am just a vision. Your vision. I am the master you secretly want. The dark side can deliver what you most desire. Admit it.
Finally, Anakin was able to banish the Vision, though the Spectre of Maul insisted that he would return, and that darkness would always remain in Anakin's soul. Sitting among the crystals and finally alone, Anakin looked down and saw that he still possessed the saber that the Vision of Maul had given to him. Obi-Wan found him in the cave, and after assuring Anakin that he was indeed real, he inspected the lightsaber. Anakin explained that he must have constructed it while he was in a trance, and that he didn't remember fashioning it. He also chose not to tell Obi-Wan about the Vision of Maul. So, Anakin built his first lightsaber during a trance in the dark side, where it was given to him by a specter of Darth Maul. That's a very important detail to remember. Now, 1 week after the events of Order 66, Vader built his new Sith weapon in the shadow of the Death Star, as Sidious had instructed. His master had provided him with the synthetic red crystal that would power the blade, along with his own lightsaber to serve as design inspiration. However, Vader thought of Sidious' saber as an antique and was not fond of its design. While he could appreciate his master's weapon, he preferred a weapon with more ballast. Vader was determined to please Sidious in this test, and he had tried to create a saber that was novel. Instead, in his meditative trance of construction, he had fashioned a black version of the first lightsaber he had wielded in his youth as Anakin Skywalker. With a thick, ridged hand grip, dual-phase focusing crystal, and forward-mounted adjustment knob, down to every minute detail, his new Sith hilt mimicked Anakin's first. Vader was disappointed and longed for the day when memories of Anakin would finally fade from his heart. So, because Anakin had originally constructed his first lightsaber during a vision through the dark side, when he went to construct his Sith lightsaber as Darth Vader, the final hilt looked exactly the same. It's just an amazing connection across these legend stories, expanding upon Anakin's fall to the dark side of the Force. Thank you guys for watching this video. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and may the Force be with you.